A very warm welcome to the online edition of the Eyes on Earth Roadshow. My name is Linda van Duivenbode, and I am your host for this session. In this roundtable discussion, the topic is skills and strategy for space sector entrepreneurs. We will start with an introduction from Mrs. Marleen from the Erasmus Center of Entrepreneurship on entrepreneurial skills. After that, Mr. Andrei Bocin-Dumitriu will facilitate a panel discussion with Marleen and three entrepreneurs, Joris Jeelof from RoadEO, Kartik Kumar from subsearch.com, and Maneesh Kumar Verma from Lunar, Zebro, Stellar Space Industries, and Hyperion Technologies. Now, don't forget, you can submit any questions you have via the chat box on your screen, and the selection will be answered by the panel. The session will end at 4:30 this afternoon, and any social media outlets you want to use, please don't forget to include the hashtag EOE Roadshow so that we can track your comments. Thank you very much. Marleen, over to you for your presentation.
My slides right now. Okay, so I will shortly tell you something about entrepreneurial skills. We conducted a research on the current skills gap among entrepreneurial skills among EO and GI entrepreneurs. So shortly I will explain you something about the Erasmus Center for Entrepreneurship. It's the entrepreneurship center I work for, and it's the center of entrepreneurship from the Erasmus University. And actually, I always show this picture if I want to explain what we do as center. So we focus on entrepreneurial skills, but on the one hand, we want to bring those skills to the bigger elephants. And we can also say like that are the bigger corporations who are not that agile. And on the other hand, you have the dogs, the agile dogs, like the startups. And there are two different types of people, but in the end, they all need those entrepreneurial skills on a different level. So that's why we also conducted this research. So in the end, it's part of the whole Copernicus program. And we wanted to find out, like, is there a skills gap among people working for those EO and GI companies? So do they miss some soft skills, business skills? And we conducted this research via field research and desk research. So we talked to different entrepreneurs if they experience a gap. So the research questions we had in the beginning is, as you see over here, like is there a skill gap between the current supply of entrepreneurial skills and future demand in this sector? So we asked those people, like, what's the current level and what's the level you want to achieve? So then in the end, we used this definition of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is, of course, a very broad definition. You can see it however you like, but we want to use this definition, like how do people act upon opportunities and how do they translate it into value for other people. And this value can be very broad. It can be financial, cultural, but social as well. We use the Entrecomp framework as basis for this research. So it's a framework with different entrepreneurial competences that can be used in all different kind of organizations. The basis of this framework is from the European Commission, and it consists out of three basic competence areas. So it starts with ideas and opportunities. So in the beginning, you need to be creative, you need to see an opportunity, and in the end, you need to translate that opportunity into action. When you translate it into action, you need different competences. And in the end, you need also some resources to really make value out of your idea. So that's what the basis we used for this research. And some findings we already found out is that there is indeed a skills gap between the current supply of entrepreneurial skills and its demand. The biggest the highest gap is in the mobilizing resources competence. So people experience it's difficult to really, if you have an idea, to really mobilize resources to bring the idea into practice. But in the end, it's also it has the lowest desired level of competence. So in the end, people experience that it's also not that important compared with other entrepreneurial competences. And the lowest gap is in taking the initiative competence. So people already experience that there is already an existing competence within people working in this sector. And the spotting of opportunities competence is the highest average level of desired competence. So that people experience that as the most important competence. So maybe you're wondering, like, why is this important? Why do we need those entrepreneurial skills? Of course, as Center for Entrepreneurship, we really think it's very important, but why is it? Why is it that important? So in the end, if you want to have a successful company, team and execution are very important to achieve that success. So in the end, it's not about the idea, it's about the execution of the idea with the team, with the right competences. So that's why it makes that important. And what we see happening nowadays is that still 3 out of 4 startups fail. Nowadays, they say even like it's 9 out of 10. So a very big part of the startups fail after starting a company. So why is that? Why are there so many startups failing? The biggest reason why startups fail is because there is no market need. So in the end, you can have a great idea, you can have a great technology, but in the end, people also need to want it. They need to buy it. They need to want to have it. And that's not the case in very many cases. So what are the criteria for a great startup? Every idea needs to be desirable, visible, and viable. And then you always need to start with desirability. Because you can start building your product, but in the end, if no one wants to have it, no one wants to use it, why should you build it in the first place? So that's also a quote of Steve Jobs, that you have to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. So what is it really what you are creating before you are creating something? And that's a big challenge we see happening with mainly knowledge-intensive startups. They really have an idea, they know the technology, but in the end, they don't know what they are building or who they are building it for. So this is Steve Blank. He is founder of Lean Startup, and what he's saying like, get out of the building. You need to talk to your customer. You need to find out what the need is, what you are trying to fulfill. So the biggest mistake startups make is that they start building the product before getting out of the building and testing what the needs are of the customers. So that's what makes very important to have those entrepreneurial competences. So that was a small introductions. If you have any question, you can ask them. So I think Andrei will take it over from here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marleen. I think it's a very interesting
It's a really strong background noise.
I think that I'm back. So thank you very much, Marleen, for making the introductions. And then that's a really interesting presentation. I think I would like to have a look at the exploded, I think the slide with what really are the most important factors. But yeah, without trying to speak too much about my thoughts, but actually give the floor to our expert panels, I would like to introduce each of the remaining 3 panelists into the discussion. So I will start with Maneesh. Maneesh, can you tell us more about your project, about your company? Really, you can do that.
Yeah, it's a very funny story that I work for 3 different projects. The first one I would like to introduce is Lunar Zebro. It is a project within Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. It's basically a small student team which aims to make the world's smallest and lightest lunar rover, which will go to the moon and currently scheduled for 2022. I am the head of operations and lead systems engineer for that project. The project has been running for the past 2 years, and it's basically unlike any other rover that has flown to the moon. So it's not based on wheels; it's actually based on a C-shaped legs, and basically it will crawl on the rough surface wherever it lands on the moon. Currently, the landing site is not fixed because it really depends on the lander or the mission, which will be planned in the future either by ESA or NASA. Then, moving on to my other 2 startup companies that I do work for part-time. One is Telespace Industries. It is located in Netherlands. I'm the lead robotics there. Basically, whatever I learned at Delft working on robotics for the past 5 years, I basically imply that and have application for the company. The company itself, primary objective is to design and manufacture parts for space missions and space companies like Airbus, but we also want to extend and have our own products in terms of robotics for agriculture or for space applications. Our goal is to become one of the major logistics companies on the moon, so robotics play a very big part in it. Then the third company is Hyperion Technologies. It's a small sat company located in Delft itself. It's about 5 to 6 years old company, and we basically make components for CubeSats like star trackers, onboard computers, memories, and up till now we have had quite a bit of successful companies launches on behalf of those subsystems. We have customers in India, in Europe, and also in US now. So actually, we are also one of the customers of SatSearch from Kartik's company. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Maneesh. That's very exciting. I think you have really big troubles to put those Chinese all between the companies. We have discussed a couple of times before about this one. But Kartik, can you tell us a little bit more about your work and the company that you're running?
Sure. I think it was a nice segue from Maneesh to me. So I'm also based in the Netherlands, an alumnus from Delft University of Technology. And in fact, the project that I'm working on is a spin-off from the university. So Delft has a very entrepreneurial campus, and there's a lot of different ways that you can start companies. My intention really wasn't to start a company, but rather to solve a problem that I was facing in my daily work. So as an engineer working on designing space missions, I was doing a lot of fancy simulation work, analysis work, but then I was spending a good chunk of my time doing what I would consider low-tech work. So Googling for suppliers, for components, parts, subsystems, trying to call, email suppliers to get quotes. And so this felt like a distinctly low-tech problem or situation in a very high-tech industry. And so SatSearch is basically a company that's been born out of trying to address that problem. And the way we have now figured out that we can address this problem, because what we discovered is that it's a problem that afflicts pretty much every company that participates in the space marketplace, is to actually build a marketplace that streamlines the way buyers and sellers connect with each other.
Thank you very much, Kartik. Now moving on to Joris, and can you please explain a little bit what is RoadEO and what are your goals, and then how successful you are in your goals? I know it's a lot to respond in 2 minutes, but can you do it, Joris?
I can at least try, Andrei. Thank you for introducing me, and thanks also for having us, first of all. RoadEO is a company that is a former incubatee from the ESA program in Noordwijk, the Netherlands. We started as a spin-off from another company, Space for Good, which you're all quite familiar with, I guess. And RoadEO is a company that dedicates itself to doing the inspections on roads using satellites, among other data types. But we use satellites to monitor roads and their quality, and to later on even predict the maintenance requirement that will be in the near future, so from 0 to 5 years. We cannot only, unfortunately, rely just on satellites for that, because the imagery is not that good yet. Hope it's coming, but I'm sure they're working on that. But the issue is that we're having here is that the resolution is a little bit too vague. So the imagery is not good enough. So we tackled that problem by adding crowdsourced mobile phone information, the data we crowdsourced from the phones. That would be the accelerometer, the vibration sensors in it, and of course the location. And what we're adding as well now is more and more becoming more and more interesting is the information that we get from our car manufacturers, that is coming from the sensoric information from the cars that they're gathering with the cars that are more or less adopted for autonomous driving. So we combine that, and we're currently developing our platform to have a way to put that information to our clients.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joris. I think we discussed before about how important automotive can become a real player, actually setting up the background information for any kind of Earth observation project. My plan is to actually bounce between the common questions and the individual questions. So I'll start now with a question for each of you in part. So I would like to start with Marleen. So Marleen, I think you already answered a little bit to my question. So, but I'd like to actually give it a more kind of an international spin-off to the question. So my question was how Erasmus Center for Entrepreneurship is helping the startup ecosystem in the Netherlands, or how can it help actually the ecosystem, startup ecosystem in Europe in general? I mean, is it a model that you can actually borrow? Is it something, a recipe that you would like actually to export to other countries, Croatia, for instance, because we all owe this event to Croatia?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we help entrepreneurs by starting their business, and we think it's very important to give them the right tools and skills to really start their own business. And we play that role, of course, in the Netherlands by offering our startup programs, but we also offer it in other countries in the form of a train-the-trainer program. So we train people from other incubators to really help them training startups as well. So yeah, we have our approach on how to start a business, and we help other people by teaching it to their own people. So then we can spread the impact we make, and we don't have to go everywhere ourselves, but we train other people to help people developing as well.
Yeah, if you can paste maybe somewhere on the screen or some information, or maybe after the meeting, maybe we can share the link where people can find more information about the program that you're running there. And maybe some people starting an incubator in Croatia would be interested actually to take in contact with you. I think that would be a really nice feature of this presentation. Jumping to Kartik. I think also you actually replied to my question a little bit in the beginning with your presentation of the company. My question was, can such help companies, especially smaller startups, build their own satellites? When I mean satellites, actually, I'm referring to sensors and instruments in the end, because we all have our own depiction of a satellite, but satellite is just a sum of instruments and then flying and then orientation. So just trying to expand a little bit the question, Kartik. What do you feel that is essential in your work, and then do you see this having a really big effect to the startups that are using your platform in order to build their own sensors, instruments, or satellites, as you want to call it?
Yeah, so maybe I can back into an answer to your question by talking a little bit about what's going on in the space market itself. So yeah. At the moment, there is this trend towards commercialization. There's a very public face to that, whether it's SpaceX's private launch of 2 astronauts over the weekend or various other things that have come out. Now, this is actually really building on something that's been happening for the last going on 2 decades. And it has been transformed by things like consumer electronics and other miniaturization efforts that are enabling people to be very agile in building things that seemingly are difficult, like satellites. And what we've realized is that you've probably seen, and we've seen in a lot of other sectors, like the automotive sector, the shipping sector, oil and gas, there is this question of digitalization. And digitalization really is about streamlining knowledge transfer across the marketplace. And so what we believe is, yes, there's lots of challenges that come with, customer discovery, understanding the problem you're solving, managing customer expectations. But similarly, there's a challenge of knowing how to source, for instance, and which partners to work with and who can deliver when you need something to be delivered, and deliver something that's reliable. And so whether it comes to building a tiny component, whether it comes to building an entire satellite platform, or whether it even comes to building something that's a downstream solution, I think what's happening in the space industry now is that we're finally starting to see this kind of organization of the marketplace. And that's kind of the movement that we're also trying to push forward, is the idea that we can use things like the internet to really help disseminate information about the structure of the industry and the players involved, that allows somebody who's sitting in Belize to source from somebody in South Africa and sell to somebody in Japan. And that's where the industry, I think, is now moving from this very hyper-local kind of environment to a truly global environment in which we'll start seeing more rapid development of satellite-based solutions, but also a closer and closer approximation to what the end customer needs and an understanding of what the customer needs. So that's kind of where we're trying to build that binding layer. But irrespective of what we're doing, I think that's kind of what's steering the entire industry, and perhaps also feeding into something like what RoadEO needs, or other startups that are relying on satellite data to be able to solve real world problems. So we all kind of sit in a value chain, and it's important that that's streamlined, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important role. And then indeed, I wanted to comment and actually congratulate the efforts of SpaceX, and then really the commercial space sector definitely has to grow, and then we have to turn to really the solution that we have in hand, which. I want to jump to Maneesh, because I think he's a combination between 3 different things, but also he has the Lunar Zebro. So can you tell us a little bit how Lunar Zebro is changing right now the way we place into the orbit and actually on the moon new instruments, because Lunar Zebro, it's a rover. Can you speak a little bit more about this, Maneesh?
Right. It is, as you said, it is a little bit different. So the thing is that we're trying to change the concept of sending a multi-million-dollar one single rover like NASA does or ESA does to Mars, but actually send multiple rovers, really small ones at the same time, and maybe even send not once, but twice, thrice, 4 times, and make it into a swarm. So it's basically based on something what ants do. They have a colony with very simple ants, and they can conduct pretty complex tasks by themselves. And that's the idea for the Lunar Zebro. Lunar Zebro is supposed to create a kind of a universal mobile platform. It doesn't have a payload of its own as such, but it's to create a mobile platform, especially for rough terrain where maybe 500,000, 10,000 of them actually work in a group and can accomplish tasks at different spots. Even within TU Delft, we have found enough projects, even with architecture for ESA studies for Mars, to make habitats where these kind of robots can be useful in terms of prospecting. So let's say mining is one of the biggest industry goal, let's say, for anyone on Mars and Moon. And the first thing that you do for mining is prospecting. You need to know exactly what is where and where you have to drill, how much you have to drill. And if you do that with a single rover, that's going to take you months. But if you do that simultaneously with smaller rovers, which are cheap, with a simple sensor, we can do months of work within days. So Lunar Zebro is basically bringing on smaller rovers to the big picture with payloads, which can be determined by the society. We are not forcing any kind of payload on it. It is scalable. The biggest aspect of Lunar Zebro that it is scalable, of course, to a certain limit. It cannot go as big as Curiosity, but definitely half of its size, where it can still carry enough scientific payload. Yeah, so that's the like the new kind of thinking that people have to bring in. So when you launch one big gigantic spacecraft, no, you're launching multiple smaller ones, which is exactly what the CubeSat industry is also doing with Constellation, right? So they're building smaller satellites to cover more area.
Yeah, I think to make kind of a naive comparison is like you have a swarm of drones flying in the sky, then making a spectacle for the Olympic Games or whatever. Yeah. But only that you will have Lunar Zebros actually covering a lot of space with really kind of high innovation new instruments on the moon. Because doing prospection on the moon, it's definitely quite expensive, and doing in the classical world is not possible. So Lunar Zebra, this is where it opens actually the possibility for new technologies and new frontiers, I think.
Exactly.
Joris, I have a question for you. Thank you very much, Maneesh. Joris, for you, I have a question. What do you think the biggest contributions comes from RoadEO in terms of mobility and sustainability? Because I actually was very happy to see that RoadEO is been nominated as top 10 mobility startups in the Netherlands. Can you please focus a little bit on this mobility aspect a little bit, also sustainability, if that touches a little bit with what you do and what you want to achieve with your company?
It certainly does, Andrei. First things first, because this was kind of two questions in one.
Yeah.
Let's start with the road quality that we're looking at, and that will always, of course, enhance road mobility in general. Simply because we are changing the way maintenance is being done on any type of pavement around the globe, is creating a more efficient way to run maintenance, which will lower emissions, will save you money on labor, will save on using materials. CO2 emissions will go down. So there's a lot of savings to be found there, both on the environmental issues and on financial. So it's actually a double saving that you're doing there. And there's your sustainability, I guess. Of course, roads are very important for any society. I think infrastructure has to be always be maintained. Of course, that's speaking on our behalf, but in general as well. Road maintenance and having good infrastructure is on the basis of any economy. It will be a booster of growth and of more prosperity. And I think this is actually something very important that we have to look at. Even if we're all turning to driving either electric or using public transportation, the whole infrastructure in general needs to be top-notch if you want your economy to grow. That's it.
Yeah. And also have an efficient drive, because that's what dictates in the end.
Absolutely.
That's what dictates how good is the mobility. For example, if I want to go in a country with non-developed infrastructure, we take ages to go from one point to point B, then everything has to suffer. Also, I read a very interesting article in the opening of a project by MVO, which is the Dutch Dutch academic body that actually finance leading edge projects in the Netherlands, and then they estimate that due to subsidence, which affects the infrastructure, we are facing actually 50 billion euros in damages. So it's really important to have companies, and not only you, but I think it needs much more companies like you to look into solutions and tackle these kind of problems. Thank you very much, Joris.
You're welcome.
I'm going to jump now a little bit again on the common question turf. And I think I opened the floor already with Joris, touching a little bit the sustainability. And I want to ask all of you, and then I will indicate with whom I would like to start, how startups actually can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a question that I think it's fair to ask. And it's good to ask because personally I was part of an impact hub which focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that's an important question that we have to put to each of you in this forum. So can you please start? Maybe Kartik, you have an answer to this question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, besides the fact that the actions that companies take in the world have an effect on the world. So having a very clear focus on what the full scope is of the effect that you're generating in the world, I think is a way to take the Sustainable Development Goals into account. So for instance, the space industry is a good example. We have a challenge now with space debris. It's a very classic problem of, sort of this tragedy of the commons and the question of who's going to give up to add value to everybody, right? And so unless we do that cooperatively, it's very difficult to solve a problem like that. And I think every industry hits on those kinds of issues. And so the Sustainable Development Goals to me are just an umbrella for a way to think about, a framework to think about the effects of things like that, particularly things like externalities. But there's a second point of this that I'd like to mention, which is that I think that sometimes there's a tendency to think of the Sustainable Development Goals as very lofty goals and also things that require a lot of capital and big enterprise to affect. But I think it also starts with how you treat other people. And within a company, you have a choice of how you treat your employees, how you share equity, for instance, who gets access to ownership in the company. And to me, this is another vehicle to enable the SDGs to happen. It's not simply about the action of the company in the outside world, but it's the company itself as an organization of people. And how you choose to operate that organization is also a very important factor, especially, of course, as the organization grows and you go to the thousands, if not tens or 100,000s of employees. The choices that you make and the way you treat people in your organization, that has a profound effect on society. And so I think it's both sides of the coin that have to be addressed, which is how do you treat people locally in your organization? And then how do you think about the full impact and full scope of the effect of what your organization is doing in the world?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting, and I think it's a very good point that you made. And I think everybody looks now about nexuses in SDGs, but there are very few penetration of the social goals in touching the other goals and creating nexuses around the really social Sustainable Development Goals. So I think you gave a really good example actually where you can actually look as an ecosystem and then how this piece of the puzzle can fit in a nexus that would involve poverty, energy, entrepreneurship, and so on, so on. So I think it's very good, and I have to take it myself on board because I think it's a very good comment that you made.
Well, just the tiny comment on that, which is that the SDGs talk about things like property and land and assets, but equally having equity in a company that you work for is a form of property. And so there is a way that an organization can fulfill the SDGs by simply being more generous with, for instance, stock options for employees. And that might seem like a very strange way to think of the SDGs, but to me, that's just about building relationships with human beings at a level that we want to.
Yeah. You can cross off definitely the poverty as a goal here, because it's very important. It's not only having one idea, but actually becoming an incubator of ideas, really giving intellectual property to more people and entitle them to develop more and then progress more. So I think that's a very good connection that you made right here. I would like to ask Marleen. I know that's a little bit difficult spot to ask you directly, but what do you see, and how do you see most of the energy of the startups should concentrate, or how actually can, already Kartik gave us a very good example, but how do you see from a point of view startups contributing to sustainable development goals? Yeah, it's true, it's our target for today, but I think we can think even for more ambitious goals like Green Deal, like 2 degrees, Paris Agreement, and so on. I mean, I hear more and more companies, small companies, adhering to 2 degrees accord. Can you elaborate a little bit on this, Marleen?
Yeah, sure. So what you see happening is that it's very, you see way more and more startups coming who want to be a social enterprise. So it's very, very popular these days. And you see it already starting at universities right now. So students are very, very social orientated, and they want to add value to people's life, and they want to be to make some social impact. So I think it's already going in the right direction, and I think startups are the best people for it, because they have those, they are innovative, they know how to add value. But what they sometimes forget is, like, I want to make the world a better place, like I want to bring value to people's life. But in the end, of course, you also need to build a business around it. You need to get in some money to be able to do what you want to do. So in the end, your goal doesn't need to be like, I want to make money, but you need to have money, of course, to be able to add on those SDGs. So I think they are doing it very well in this moment. So that's a nice.
Do you think it's a generational thing? Because you said you see more and more people in students, but I can see these actually all over the place. I work in an impact hub where I could see the age of the startups and actually the entrepreneurs, the ZZP, as we call it in the Netherlands. Do you think it's a generational thing, or it is something that we see everywhere, regardless of the age?
Yeah, I think it's indeed something in this generation, because you see nowadays happening way more and more and more. So people really make that shift. So it's not anymore about earning money, but it's about adding value. So I think it's a good trend that's happening right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Marleen. Now, I find it. Maneesh, you also have to answer to the question about sustainable development goals. How you and your activity with the startups that you work and you lead, how do you see yourself contributing to the sustainable development goals? Have you spotted one of them, or if you cannot point one, maybe you can point to some important policies that we all like to look up, policies in ecological environments, or even policies for space industry. Can you please answer to my challenge, to my provocation to answer to this question?
Yeah, so I really wish I didn't have to answer this one, but yes, we cannot deny it that everyone working in any kind of industry has to think about it. And of course, building stuff is nice, but you also need to make sure that it's a cradle to cradle kind of a process where things are built, and then at the end of the life cycle, it will finish and come back to building it again, and the raw materials are used again. Now, going back to my project of Lunar Zebro, this is a huge problem because when you deploy thousands of rovers, they cannot last forever. They will break down at some point, and then you might just create a trash can basically on the moon, which is not good, of course, for the environment. So Stellar Space Industries actually is on the technical panel of the Hague International Space Resource Governance Working Group, and about half a year ago we did finish the documentation for it. And end of life of things was a major concern for us. One of the aspects that we can do is to make sure that the design and the starting of these robots or rovers or missions are planned in such a way that end of life is actually a main focus. So we don't use materials, or we do not have any harmful procedures which could actually end up making it more difficult for a cleanup crew, let's say. But for sustainability as such, because we are more on designing and manufacturing, it's more on the material science. So we need to start using sustainable materials as much as possible. Prototyping should be done not in like olden times, like a decade ago with CNC. Straightforward, we can still use 3D printing now, which uses recyclable plastic very much. So only the final product should be done in like the most robust way possible. So there are not many sustainable goals that can be done to a company like Stellar or even Lunar Zebro for that matter, because it's just the nature of the mission as such. But what we can do certainly is help to make sure that other industries can take advantage of these multiple numbers. So like Joris said that he's into mapping and mobility. So instead of, again, having one major car or big car doing the same thing 10,000 times, you can deploy smaller rovers to do the same thing, reducing the energy footprint overall of the system. But of course, at the end, even that rover will die and you have to reuse the parts. So the reusing capability has to be designed early on in the project. So you can just take the chassis, reuse it, refit it, and make it work for something else. Same thing with robotics. People ask about batteries because you will use a large quantity of batteries. Where will these batteries go? Tesla will have the same problem within 10 years when large quantities of unused batteries will come back. And how do you reuse them? So there is no one answer of how we will. So we are definitely not directly kind of contributing to the sustainability goal, but indirectly we can help others to get to that goal which they have in mind.
I think it's a very interesting answer, and then really it is into the setting in the principle of the way you do your business or the way you do your own activities and work. You have to set driving goals to drive the goal of being sustainable and reusable, because definitely the reuse, the recycling it's going to become more and more important. I have a question now, since we are at the common questions, and Linda put the question, and then I think any of you can answer, and then just jump in, or I can nominate you. Do you think you can only be a real and successful entrepreneur if you're willing to invest in your own company? So really take a risk. So I will start with you, Maneesh. I know I can see that you're nodding.
Yeah, I can say that for the past couple of years, people have been coming to me to open my own company, but I have pretty much restrained myself to do so. To be a successful entrepreneur itself, you don't have to own your own company. You can just help others. I mean, that's what I do with Yeri at Stellar Space Industries and Bert at Hyperion. One of the biggest things that I don't do this is because of all the paperwork that comes with just starting a company. And Kartik and everybody here who has a company knows about it. And I honestly do not want to do it. I just want to like help someone else be the engineer that I am, that I actually wanted to start my degree or education with. And you can still end up learning a lot from them. So I do end up learning a lot from both my bosses. And of course, it's not enough, because training specifically for starting a company has its own advantages, but down the line, experience counts. So if I ever want to do something like myself, 15 years down the line, sure, I can do it. But as of now, I think a lot of people can help other entrepreneurs get there, because it's about the mentality. If you can find someone with the right mentality, one person trained in entrepreneurship can actually lead a lot of engineers with the same thinking to a successful product. I don't think you need yourself to be an entrepreneur and own the company. As long as you feel belonging to the company, I think it's
yeah. Yeah, I think the question refers more to the rainbow heads. A person being entrepreneur, being also engineer, system engineer. But yeah, I do agree that sometimes for there also be a successful company with not having a rainbow hat person in your own company. Can you comment a little bit on this question, Joris?
Absolutely, I do think you have to put everything in that you have. Of course, if building this company is the only passion you have in life, if this is what you want to do, if this is what you believe in, go for it. Come on, put an effort in, put everything in. Ask your parents for money, ask your family for money. I don't care who you ask. Just get the money together you need and you start your company. Go ahead.
That's a very interesting question, Joris. Kartik, can you comment also a little bit?
Yeah, I guess to play devil's advocate, I think the question is kind of missing something that's probably more important through this whole process, which is asking the question of why you want to start a company. I think the idea of starting a company is in itself predicated on the idea that you're solving somebody's problem and they want you to build something and that you might have an opportunity to, in a transaction with them, sell to them and get money to do it. So a company, I think, is a consequence of that. And so I don't think anybody should be thinking about starting a company. I think it's kind of actually the entire problem with, and why, getting maybe to Marleen's presentation, why so many startups fail. Because her number one factor was people aren't solving real problems in the world. So I think we need to get away from this idea that startups are special, that companies are special. I mean, we don't look at the baker down the street and think of them as something special, because it's every day and it's solving a problem for somebody who wants bread. And I think that there is this misnomer, and it is also part of what the PR machine has generated, that startups are something special and everyone should be doing that, and you want to be in the in club. But honestly, I think that's actually the reason why there's such a high failure rate, because if you come to the game wanting to win but not knowing what game you're playing, then chances are you're going to play tennis while the other person is playing football. So I think that's fundamental to this. Don't think about starting a company, I would say. Think about fixing a problem. And I don't think that's as trivial as it seems. Go find a problem, or don't even find a problem. Observe the problems that you come across in your daily life, because those are usually worth solving if they matter at least to you. And you have a better chance of, and it could turn into a company, it could turn into something else, it could turn into a community, it could turn into a side project. I don't think the consequence of it matters, because if you're rooted in solving a problem, then the rest of it follows. And sometimes that leads to a Google, and sometimes that leads to a bakery, and sometimes that leads to a hobby project.
Yeah. But I do think that's a utility in actually people keep striving and doing it, but they just have to learn to do it better, as you said, and actually linking with the bigger idea of helping the society in the end, or helping a client, or doing something that is useful in the end. Because otherwise a startup is just a mere reflection of yourself. And then who would like to actually invest on something that reflects on your thoughts and that actually doesn't reflect the need of the society? So I think that those are kind of...
But I think, so just to interject there, I think the notion that you can know what society needs is also a little bit flawed. You know what society needs from your personal experience. You have one vantage point. So your personal experiences and expanding your personal experiences is a great way to understand more about the world. But you start from within. You start from who you are. It's not actually possible to take your mind and displace it and put it elsewhere. So you've got to start from your model of the world. And I just think that startups have taken on a character that is a little bit unhealthy at the moment, because there's a focus on being a startup rather than solving problems, I would say. And one is a consequence of the other. You solve problems, then that will, in certain cases, leads to companies, and some of them that scale very quickly, called startups. But that's what I would assume benefits society more, is solving problems rather than starting millions and millions of startups.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Marleen, can you comment a little bit on the question that Lida put as well?
Of course.
Because I know we spoke a little bit about when we first met, actually.
Yeah, so that's about investing. And of course, I totally agree with Kartik. Like, in the end, you want to add value to people's life. And the goal is, of course, not to start a business, but the goal is to solve a problem. So that's definitely true. But what you also see happening is that many entrepreneurs only succeed after their third try. Like they failed already 2 times, and then they come up with another idea and they succeed. So in the end, it's also about developing your entrepreneurial skills. So developing your skills to solve a certain problem, to find out what the need is from a certain group of people. So really, what I told, like, get out of the building, doing some research to see what's happening out there, and then you can add some value to people's life. And the question about investing in your own company, I think it's very important that you invest in your own company, because in the end, if you start a company, you really need to believe in your own company. So if you don't believe in your own company, why would other people invest in you? And why would other people buy your product if you don't believe in it 100% yourself?
Yeah, that's interesting. But I would also add that once you start a company, you invest your energy, which is also kind of, if you convert energy into money, it's also investing money in the end because you invest your time. But I do agree that you have to try both if you have the possibility, of course, because then you'll be reaching to a very giving away investor. I also picked a question from the local stakeholders. It might be a little bit difficult for you to answer, but I just want to give you the floor and actually try to think about something that we all did in our life, which is basically networking. But it's not only about networking; it's actually about how can you find places of. So the question is places of excellence and possible training for Earth observation experts, free and paid, and then how actually Earth observation wannabe expert can access to this. And I'm not referring only to the domain knowledge, but actually also to entrepreneurship or financial and so on. And from your experience, you already elevated Erasmus Center for Entrepreneurship as being one of these places, but maybe you can mention from your previous experience, maybe Joris, you can mention a place or indicate an answer for this question. So basically, a place of excellence or possible training, either paid or for free.
Well, I guess the SBIC system in Noordwijk is a very helpful program, and a lot of. So of course, I can only answer that for the Dutch situation, of course. I think a lot of the provinces have their own regional entrepreneurial aid. So for startups and for smaller companies that are doing some innovative work, just make sure that you're out there. Make sure that people know who you are and what you are about, and you will actually be contacted. It actually works the other way around. When you're there, when you're working on it and people know it, they will put you in contact with the right people. At least that's how it's been working for us so far. Yeah, well, look, here we are. Talking to you guys.
So that's a very positive view. It means that I have to go out more and actually meet more people and then demonstrate how I have the capacity to turn an idea into a concept and a product. Kartik, I know that you participate to a lot of meetings and then seminars and webinars. And can you please elaborate a little bit? Maybe you can help our audience a little bit with maybe a suggestion, something to help you in your career or maybe in your entrepreneurship venture.
Are you specifically talking relating to Earth observation data, or you mean entrepreneurship as a...
Entrepreneurship, I think. Entrepreneurship.
I think, one of the challenges now is there's just so many resources. If you go to YouTube and you just type in entrepreneurship, lean startup, whatever, you'll find a bazillion videos. There's a lot of different incubator accelerator programs out there that have online resources. Other than ESA's own resources, Y Combinator is a good example. Y Combinator runs a program called Startup School. I think they run it now twice a year. It's a 10-week program, and they kind of walk you through their philosophy around how to build things that people want, which is kind of their motto, build things that people want. So I think that, there are a number of resources like that. Platforms like Coursera, Khan Academy, they have a lot of these sort of entrepreneurship courses. But honestly, the most instructive thing for me, so if I really had to bring it down to the brass tacks, was to get out there and do it. Because you really none of this really hits you as hard as being told by a customer that they want what you're providing and they're willing to sign the contract, or what's more likely in the beginning, that they don't want what you're providing and they don't care about you or what you're doing and that it's stupid. And so honestly, I don't think that there's a real shortcut to that. I think that a lot of these resources that exist at universities, elsewhere, they're very good to frame, what you should be doing as a founder or entrepreneur. But there is no substitute for getting out there and getting hit in the face. And I think the idea that, it could be not the first time that you succeed, the second, third, whatever, is also something that you learn as you're going, and so you learn to pick yourself up. So part of this is actually to build this idea of resilience in your mentality and perseverance, because I think another way to think of it, if startups were that easy, then we'd all be bazillionaires. So there is something that, there's no free lunch theorem. It's supposed to be hard. It is hard. You are going to sweat and not sleep much. And so I don't believe that there's any shortcuts there. And the resources that are there are complementary to the idea that you've just got to put the hard graft in and get out of the building and put yourself in front of people.
Yeah, that's
what I've...
Yeah, that's very interesting. I do agree with this. Go out there and then do it, because you will learn more from the client and more from developing the product than just watching bazillions of trainings and so on.
Maybe I just a final note on that I can give as an example. One of the most difficult things is to be a door-to-door salesperson. So I've realized there are small trivial things like that, like an experiment of deciding in your neighborhood to knock on every single door and ask for something is one of the most difficult things for people to do. It scares me to do it as well. And so you can do things like that help, I think, move you towards being entrepreneurial and all that kind of stuff without spending a lot of money.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We are nearing actually towards the end of our session, but I want to launch to you, and I think I skipped Maneesh for this question, but I'll give him the floor for the last observation or remark. I mean, around the corner there's a lot of initiative. We have the Green Deal coming on. We have the end of the European funding, which is EU Horizon, which is Horizon 2020, but Horizon Europe, it's around the corner. We also have at ESA, Earth Explorer request for ideas has been launched. I mean, how do you place yourself for all these initiatives? I mean, do you want to be part of it? Do you want to contribute to it? How do you access funding, grants? How do you start new projects? And this would be my last question for all of you. So please just jump in. Maneesh, if you can start, then the others can complete with an answer.
Yeah, sure. So I think the best way is depending on what your company does and what size it is of, because of course different sizes of companies will approach these fundings differently and how they want to put use to it. For us, for both the companies that I work for at least, it's majorly to actually get more research money in, because we are still product developers. We are not like Airbus large scale integrators. We are still going to develop the lower level products. So when we go into these kind of grants and funding, we are looking for more like R&D and have one product out and seeing the bigger picture solutions, let's say. So as Kartik said, like not everybody has to be an entrepreneur in this, but also not everybody has to solve problems in everything. So both my companies which I work for approach it very, very differently. So let's say like Celeste Industries is purely going for design and like manufacturing of no matter what, because we have the skill sets to build and design anything. But the Hyperion cannot do that. They are very, very focused on the sensor technology or the highly integrated systems like instruments and payloads. So their approach is completely different, because Hyperion needs more of R&D money to do more of background work and then have one product out. And then it can be that Celeste Industries takes that one product and mass produces it. Then you need funding to upscale, basically.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Which is a huge problem in Netherlands. Like upscaling is not easy here.
Yeah, I know about some European investment bank trying to actually contribute there into upscaling. I know they are very active in Croatia. Joris, maybe you can close off because we still have 30 seconds, I think, before handing into Linda.
Well, if it's about trying to get funding, you're trying to get funding for your upscale. Again, be out there, make sure investors know who you are. And very important, I think, for every entrepreneur in a startup, learn how to negotiate. Just don't say yes at the first offer you get. That's most important, I think, because people are trying to steal your idea. Be careful.
Yeah. I think I also keep you close, Joris.
and also use that money to invest in the talent. Coming back to the whole entrepreneurship training, invest in your talent, invest in younger talents, because that's what's going to give your company the boost that you want.
Wise words, Maneesh. Thank you.
Yeah. definitely a lot of talent is going to be present now on the market because of all these coronavirus things. I want to close off and then hand it over to Linda, but not before actually thanking you, all of you, very much. We already, I think we covered a lot of areas, and I think we had really good quality answers, and then you share from your expertise. Linda, if you want to take it over from now.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for sharing your insights and suggestions. Maybe before I do the final closing, Andrei, if people have been inspired or are looking for additional information based on this session, is there anywhere you can recommend they go as a starting point?
I would say contact the organizers. Definitely, I'm going to try to answer to all the questions involving the panelists into answer the questions, because there were 4 questions, and then try to answer to them, and then simply look at our bios and then try to contact us directly, because we all have websites, we all have LinkedIn, and then we'll be more than happy to contribute and actually help. Because this is the most important thing. Space industry is still small, and we need to grow it bigger.
Yeah, and we need to do it together. Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. So that brings us to the end of this session on entrepreneurship. There will be a recording published for people who want to look back on some of the tips or insights that were shared today. But for now, this is the end of this session and the end of the first day of the Eyes on Earth online conference. Thank you also for the participants for staying around and sharing this time with us. And we hope you will join us again tomorrow, starting at 10. And just to build on some of the suggestions at the end, there will also be a session on other opportunities and programs that are out there to support entrepreneurs, people with ideas. So make sure you join those sessions as well. So for now, thank you very much. Have a very nice evening and look forward to seeing you again.